So today I want to talk to you about some interesting Appalachian phrases. Just little things or words, phrases that we use, not necessarily funny ones or wise ones like I've talked about before, but the ones that are just sprinkled in our daily language. I guess more than phrases, they're not really, they're like grammar usages almost, some of them, and some of them are phrases. Anyway, let's get into it. So the first one is here while back. So one of my readers on the Blind Pig and the Acorn brought this one to my attention. He asked me if I'd ever thought about it if I said here while back. And as soon as he said it, I was like, yeah, I say that all the time. There's so many, as I've studied Appalachia over the years, there's so many words and phrases and sayings that I hear or I read in a book or something. That's when I realize, oh, that's unique to Appalachia. Otherwise, I think, well, the whole world don't say that? I thought everybody said that. So anyway, here while back, that just means yesterday or in the past, a month ago or something like that. But instead of saying that, we say here while back. So I might say, here while back, I started making sure that I ate oatmeal every day and I feel much better. That's not true. I don't eat oatmeal every day. But anyway, you get the gist of it. So here while back, that's a good one. That's a neat one that I hadn't thought of until Ed Ammons told me about it. An interesting one is had ought to. So we say had ought to for should instead of saying should. We say you had ought to do this instead of you should do this. So in the Dictionary of Smoky Mountain English had some good entries for that. So here they are. So 1904 in the Capehart notebooks, a feller ought to have a good crowing rooster. The Hall collection, Cades Cove, Tennessee, you ought to see them. Law, Cora Myers, that was Cora Myers that said that. 1939, Walker Mountaineer looks. I guess it's a sin and I hadn't ought to do it because they don't mean no harm. Hall, Phonetics, 47, Cades Cove, I reckon we ought to be getting home. The clouds are bulling up there on the mountains. 1979, Carpenter, Walton War. Now you hadn't ought to talk like that, Ellie, the man said as the doctor went through the door. So that's a good one. Sometimes we say hadn't ought to. So hadn't you ought to do this or you hadn't ought to do that. So it's all we're saying should. I don't know why we don't say should, why we say ought to or had ought to, but that's what we say. So this was one time when I wrote about it on the Blind Pig and the Acorn. When I use the dictionary, I use it so much to quote from. I like sometimes to add my own collection. So this was 2019 Presley collection. My wife told me I had ought to get the dishes washed if I knew what was good for me. That was the deer hunter saying that, and I wasn't. He was just teasing. I wasn't going to do anything to him if he didn't get the dishes washed. Here's another good one, run and go. So you ever get a run and go? A run and go just means you start real quick. You get going really quickly. A run and start or a leap. And there was some of them in the Dictionary of Smoky Mountain English too. 1915 Dingus word list, a run before leaping. Hall collection, the bear wheeled back on the dogs. The bear hunter took a run and go and run his arm into the hole he cut into it and run it right up to his heart. Sounds really pretty scary. Here's one, 1991, Haynes Haywood Home. When it was really cold, ice skating on the branches and creeks was fun if we could get away with it. Of course, we didn't have ice skates, so we'd take a run and go and slide our shoe soles. Me and Paul used to like to, it's really rare for our creek here, the Stamy Creek, for it to freeze over solid, but it has. There's been times that it did. I should say freeze under solid. Underneath there's still a creek going, but freeze hard enough on the top in places for people to actually stand on is what I mean. When we were little and that happened, that's what we were doing, acting like we were ice skating, even though it's just a little tiny creek. It wasn't like you could actually ice skate. The 1998 Dante, the train had to go up and go away up here and get a run and go and come back. Sometimes you have to get a run and go. Makes me think of a story. Pap and Granny had a white Impala about the time that I learned how to drive. One of those big old white Impalas, you know, I'm talking about, I don't know if it was I guess it was a 70s something model. It was an old car even though that's been a long time. It was older than I was, is what I'm saying. We never had new cars. But my uncle's driveway was really bad. It's paved now, but in those days it was just dirt, gravel, and it would get really rutted out in the winter time, and this different times, but especially in the winter. So if you wanted to go up it, you had to get a run and go. You had to start around the curve and get a run and go. So I remember one time me and Pap were going up there in that big old Impala, and I never was afraid with him driving. He drove a truck for so long, and he was just capable, and no matter what he did, I was never afraid, so I wasn't worried. But he went back down around the curve and got a run and go, and got really going fast to get it, because he didn't want to walk. We wanted to go all the way up there. We got about midways up, and the whole Impala just turned around in the road, and then we were going back down before we knew it. Anyway, we did get up there, though. He tried it again, and then we got up there. So run and go. Again, like I said, I like to leave my own citations when I write about these things. So in 2019, this was actually Granny that said this, but I wrote about it on The Blind Pig. This was my citation for run and go. To make it easy to carry into the house, they'd rigged up a ramp out of old planks so that if they got a good run and go, along with a little help, they could push the wood all the way to the door of the house. So that was neat. That was Granny. So it was a story she was telling about her brothers. So another one someone sent me that reads The Blind Pig and the Acorn was been a being. That's another one that I would have never thought of that, as even realized that we say that. So an example might be maybe Matt says, hey, does anyone know where that smallest cast iron frying pan is? And I would say, I don't know. It's been a being right in the left side of the cabinet when you open it up. So been a being. So if you think about it, it's whatever object it is being while it's sitting there, I guess is why we say it. I don't know, but it's been a being. So I might say, there's been a being a dog down there every time I walk, and I'm afraid of it. It's a great old big dog. So that's been a being. This one's really interesting, all three. So that's one of the ones that I just noticed in the Dictionary of Smoky Mountain English, and it's one of those that I would be like, what? Everyone doesn't say that? So this is what the dictionary says about it. It's an adjective phrase, a variant syntactic position after nouns or pronouns modified, whatever that means. 1937, Hall Collection, Emmert's Cove, Tennessee. You can't pull us off the porch, all three. Nell Cardwell. I'm gonna whoop yuns, all three. 1973. They had 3 children, 3 girls after that, and they're all 3 still a-living. So we say all 3. I say that all the time. I might say they're all 3 in there acting crazy and being silly, and they're keeping me up at night. So I guess the difference is, since we're saying all, we really don't need to say 3. Just say they're all in there. And it's funny, when I really thought about it, I never say they're all 2 in there or they're all 4 in there. Maybe I do say all 4. Maybe. Anyway, that was one of the ones that was in the book, and that I was like, what? That everyone doesn't say this? Anyway, but it was noted in the Dictionary of Smoky Mountain English to be unique to the Smoky Mountains, which are in Appalachia for sure. Here's one that's, if you do a Google or you hear, a lot of times when people talk about these weird phrases that maybe don't make sense to other people, this one almost always comes up, and it's I don't care to. So if somebody asks me if I want to do something and I say I don't care to, it doesn't mean like I don't care to and I really don't want to. It means, sure, I don't care to. I'll do that. I'll help you out. I'll go. Sure, I'd like to go to the wedding. I don't care to. I'd like to go. So it's a sort of a weird thing when you think about it, but it's one that, like, it's so common that I never thought about it until one of my very first bosses I had way back. She told me that when she first moved to the area and she wanted to make friends with her neighbor people, neighbor ladies, and she ran into one of them at the local little store, and so she said, hey, nice to see you or whatever, would you like to go into town and get something to eat? Well, the neighbor lady said, I don't care to, meaning sure, I'll go. And she thought, okay, well, she don't care to, and she drove off and left her standing there. And then it was later, they had a big laugh over it when she began to understand what that meant in this area or in Appalachia as a whole. A lot of people say it. Anyway, I don't care to. So Granny might say, do you want to come down here and we'll do this or that? And I say, sure, I don't care to. It means I don't mind a bit. I'll be right there. So that's one. If you do a Google, you'll find a lot of different information about it. So way back when I was in college, in Appalachian studies class is another one that I was like, what? Everybody doesn't say that kind of stuff. So the way we use one in place of either, or either one, we use those in a different manner than most people. So I just still can't hardly fathom that everyone doesn't use it the same way. But sure enough, it's in the dictionary Smoky Mountain English when I looked it up. So postponed one. To identify alternatives, Smoky speakers employ not only are or either are, but three forms that may be placed after the second of two alternative elements, either, one, or simply one. One, the last is the most common, and that may coordinate different parts of speech or types of phrases, most often nouns. Despite formal similarity to the other usages, postponed one is most likely derived from the phrase one or the other. Related negative constructions that follow conjoined elements include neither and neither one. Now, that's kind of hard for me to understand because I'm not a grammar expert, but if you are, maybe you understood all that. All that to say, these are some examples of how it was used. These are examples from the dictionary. You never had any trouble out of them people from Big Catalooch or Little Catalooch either. See, I can't imagine that everybody wouldn't say it like that. It was just about as steep as a yoke cattle could go up or come down, either one. She found out how to get moonshine without making it or buying it, either one. He was in Tennessee or Kentucky, one. See, I'm sure I probably said that this week. I don't know. Did she go to Hayesville? She went to Hayesville or Murphy, one, but I'm not sure what store she got it at. I can't believe everyone doesn't say that. I'm going home and see Emmert's Cove or Hell, one, before daylight. Man, would you like to know where that sentence come from? That's a good one. They had revival meeting morning and evening or morning and night, one, all the time. That hearing aid, it's either too high or too low, one. The first settlers come in here in the 1830s or the 40s, one. I was taught to respect elderly people, and we were to refer to them as aunt or uncle, one, if they were old. They wouldn't run far. They'd sit down and climb a tree or pick a fight, one. Soon it all died down, and they never made mention of Meady nor Bert neither. I didn't think about Eloyd or Enzor, neither one, to be there. If I had it to do over, I might name Corey and Katie Eloyd and Enzor if I'd known that. Wouldn't that be great names? Anyway, those are the ones. Like I said, that one's so common here. I'll be interested to see if it's common where you live too, because it is so common. So another one is if we make light of someone, which is to make light of someone is to tease them. It could be to make fun of them, but most of the time it's just like you're making light in a teasing manner. So my husband, Matt, the deer hunter, he's the world's worst to make light and to tease Corey and Katie and me too. I know about his tricks though, and they do too by now, but he used to get them, my goodness, he'd tell them they were so gullible, and he'd tell them stories and they'd believe it, and then they'd find out it wasn't true and they'd just be mad and he'd just laugh. But that's a good one, make light. If you make light of something. Now sometimes that could be used in a negative way though. If you were making light of something serious, making light of something that really was near and dear to someone's heart, you could hurt someone's feelings or offend them. He doesn't do that. He uses it, I'm talking about him being it in a teasing manner. But there are serious things that you don't want nobody to make light of. So that's a good one. One of my favorite ones is, there's a whole series of them. It's might, how we use might in our language. So these are some examples in Appalachia, just for an example. I might offer advice like this. You could soak the plants in water to revive them. Or I might say it like this. You might soak the plants in water to revive them. Or you can soak the plants in water to revive them. Or you coulda soak those plants in water to revive them, or you ought to soak those plants in water to revive them. You should soak those plants in water to revive them. You should ought to soak those plants in water to revive them. You would want to soak those plants in water to revive them. Now that's a whole lot of different mights and wouldas and oughta and all that to say you should have soaked your plants in water to revive them. Well, as I studied on that, again, what did I do? I went to the dictionary Smoky Mountain English, and this is, again, grammar above my head, but one part of it is like, just wait and I'll read it to you. Modal, Auxiliaries in smoky speech differ from general usage only in usage not in form. That may be modal. I don't know. I guess that's modal. Auxiliaries in smoky speech differ from general usage only in usage not in form. As in other Southern varieties of American English, might and occasionally may combine with other modals to express conditional force and indirectness. Now that last part, to express conditional force and indirectness, is the part that made me go, aha! What I think about that, using might like that in all those variations that I shared, is exactly that. So sometimes when I tell people they might could do something, I have no clue if it would work. I mean, I don't know. It might. You could try it. Why don't you see if it could? You might could revive those plants by soaking them in water. Maybe they would. Maybe it'll revive them. Maybe they're still dead. I just don't really know. But other times when I tell somebody that, I mean, you should listen to me because I know and I'm right and you should do it. So why don't I just say that? Why don't I say, you should do this, or they're going to die and you're not going to have any plants? Well, all that speaks directly to the Appalachian personality traits. Most Appalachians will go to great lengths to keep from offending somebody. So that's a gentler way of telling somebody what they should do, to say you might could, you might ought to. It's like a gentle way to lead into that. Also, most Appalachians are modest. And that's another modest way of saying, well, I don't know everything, but you know, you might could do that and it might work. That's another way to approach it. I know with Pap, over the years, there's so many, he was such a wise person. He would have never said that, but he was. And so many times I heard him give that kind of gentle advice to somebody. You might could, you might ought to, you might should. And then to see them by the end of the conversation, just so thankful that he gave them an answer to their problem, whatever it was, whether it was something like reviving plants or something serious, you know, that he give them an answer. But he did it in such a gentle way that then they were left thinking, wow, how did this such soft-spoken, gentle man tell me exactly what I needed to hear? But it's the way that we approach things as Appalachians, in that way, that humble, modest kind of, don't want to offend you, don't want you to think that I'm being braggity and that I know everything, even though I do know that if you soak those plants in water, it will revive them. It just speaks, that's one phrase usage, or what did they say, modal auxiliaries, if you're a grammar person and knows exactly what that means, that speaks directly to the personality traits of Appalachians. So I hope you've enjoyed this little talk about phrases, and I hope that if there's any phrase that you've heard in Appalachia that you think's unique, or grammar usage or whatever, and you'd like to talk more about it, I hope you'll leave me a comment in the down below, and I hope that you'll share any thoughts that you have on the ones that I did share. Maybe you're familiar with them, maybe you've never even heard them, but I hope that you'll do that in the comments too. I hope that you'll subscribe to my channel, share this video with your friends and neighbors, but mostly just drop back by often as I celebrate all things Appalachian, including the wonderful language that I love so much.